As the offseason has reached the calm before the storm, we are going to go over all of the best free agents on the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball. It's quite the free agency class, and we're going to get to all of it. This is the Fumblerooski podcast. It may not have always showed it in the stat sheet, but you can see him making throws when he needs to make the throws.
Back-to-back games where he has 3 touchdowns. Someone's got to get that 6 or 7 spot.
He's an elite wide receiver as a rookie.
Truly a lose-lose scenario for both sides.
Welcome to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. I'm Adam Wright with CJ Medeiros. And I got to say, there are some points in the offseason where you can make a case it's even more exciting than the regular season of football itself. And I'm talking about free agency, the NFL draft, all the mock drafts that we're going to do. And we're not quite there yet. We're at the franchise tag deadline window, which is about as overhyped as it gets, if it is hyped at all. Because
Really not.
and this is a year where it's going to be very quiet. We may not get any franchise tags past the one that we are expecting to happen with Tee Higgins with the Cincinnati Bengals. And what if that doesn't happen? It hasn't happened yet. So there are some, there are a couple candidates to be tagged. We've gone over that last week, but it's not a guarantee. So we're going to go over, while we're waiting for free agency, we're going to go over some of the better free agents on the market. I have Spot Track open right now, and we're going to break it up by offense and defense. We're going to go through, don't worry, we're going to go through all the position groups. We'll start with sort of the pass catchers, then we'll go into some running backs, quarterbacks, some offensive line prospects, and then we'll head over to the defensive side of the ball. So this will be nice and thorough. And hopefully this will help to hold you guys over until March 10th, when the legal tampering period begins, and then that's when everything's going to start moving, because then free agency happens, and then you get into draft season where you're going through all the mock drafts. You kind of get a feel, especially with free agency ending, you get a feel for what each team needs and who they're going to take. And it's going to start to solidify in a general kind of sense of where each player is going to go. Because let's face it, we don't know what a lot of these players are going to take, who a lot of these teams are going to take, because we don't know what they're going to do in free agency. Or some big trade could happen, and it's going to shake everything up. We didn't think that Abdul Carter would go to the Browns until we just realized, like 2 weeks ago, Myles Garrett just wants out. So that suddenly means that there's a great chance that Abdul Carter ends up as a Cleveland Brown. So who knows what's going to happen? And there's a lot of things that could end up happening. And we're going to cover all of it this season. But in the meantime, let's get into some free agency. And I wanted to start with pass catchers. And we'll go with wide receivers. Tee Higgins, and as we know, he's not franchise tagged yet. Good chance he will be. And it's the non-exclusive tag. Someone could technically match any offer. But the problem is, if they get him, then they have to surrender 2 first-round picks. So essentially, he's tagged and he's under team control. No one in their right mind is going to give up 2 first-round picks to sign a player to a deal. That makes no sense. Another guy is Chris Godwin, who we haven't been able to get to go over, but Greg Auman reported that they are actually working. Godwin and the Buccaneers, they're working on a deal, and they're giving themselves more time in order to do it. So I believe they prolonged their contract void in order to buy themselves more time, essentially. I'm trying to bring up the tweet right now, or the X post. Greg Auman tweeted, it's still Twitter in my mind, Chris Godwin's current contract was due to void, triggering $18 million in dead money against the Bucs 2025 cap, but the two sides agreed to move the void date to the final day of the league year, which was March 12th, buys them more time to work out a new deal and keep some 2025 cap savings. That's big because it shows that both sides want to work out a deal to kind of keep Chris Godwin in Tampa Bay. And there's a lot of things to like about Tampa right now. We've brought it up a couple of times throughout the season, but dare I say they've kind of established themselves a winning sort of culture, because they've been retaining free agents. They've been bringing in new guys. They're trying to win games. Of course, you're always trying to win, but it's the teams that their actions match their words, right? They're retaining free agents. They've been doing it for years. Ever since Tom Brady arrived, they've been keeping guys around. They've been signing them to deals. They've been reworking contracts. They've been making smart moves. It's like that, like Tom Brady, he stepped into the building and just everything changed. And they won that first Super Bowl, and that just changed something within the organization. Suddenly they loved the taste of winning, and they hated losing. They did not want to go back to the old Buccaneers. This kind of shows that here, because they made that effort with Mike Evans last offseason. Years ago, if you remember, right after they won the Super Bowl, they made the effort to keep Levante David and Devin White. And suddenly they were able to keep everybody together. Everyone bought in. Chris Godwin has bought in. And there's a good chance that Chris Godwin, before free agency even starts, remains a Buccaneer.
Yeah. I mean, it's very possible. I'll give you that. The thing is, though, if you're Tampa, now a lot of teams, what they do is that, and this is something, it's a phenomenon you'll notice. I'll start with the phenomenon. You see these teams, like you'll notice how whenever the tag window opens, within the first 24 hours, even within the first week, nobody gets tagged, right? The real excitement, if you can call it that, of the franchise tag is at the tail end, like at the 11th hour. That's when everything happens. That's when, I'm trying to curse the show. That's when the proverbial stuff hits the fan, as the kids say. But the thing is, the tag is the last resort, where if negotiations go on longer than you expect, you can use the tag to kind of keep them in the building against their will. Of course, you're practically holding them hostage. But hey, what's perverting the free market if you can't keep your guys around? Am I right? But yeah, that's the last resort. The thing is, though, this is, even though he's bought in, there's a lot of teams sniffing around him, and Tampa may be his first choice, but don't be lackadaisical about this. If you are Tampa, you are in a race against time, because could you tag him? It's very possible, but I would like to warn you of one thing. It would be the third time that you've tagged him. And afterwards, you can't do it anymore. And not just that, the tag gets more expensive every time you use it. So this would be, if my math is correct, it's probably not, but imagine if it is, around $30 million completely guaranteed to tag him again. So if you're Tampa, that's just way too much in one season for Chris Godwin, especially fully guaranteed. And if he walks out that door went on the legal tampering period, March 10th of 12 p.m. on Monday, then he's probably not coming back. So because the franchise tag, a lot of teams use it as a tool, but you can use it, but you'd be shooting yourself in the foot to do so.
Yeah.
And if I were a betting man, I'd say if an extension doesn't get done by legal tampering period, odds are he's gone day 1 or day 2.
Yeah. And I can name there's a laundry list of teams that would be kind of coming out of the woodwork trying to get him on their team. I can name a bunch right off the top of my head: the Patriots, the Raiders, the Commanders, the Chargers. All have cap space and all need wide receivers. And Chris Godwin would be at the top of the list for all of those teams. So there would be no short of interest, and I think that's part of why they want to buy some time, because they want to work out a deal, and they know if they don't, that Godwin's likely to be gone real quick. Moving on from that, I'm going to name these wide receivers in bunches because they're all kind of in the same scenario. Ready?
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams. What do they all have in common?
Older.
On the wrong side of 30 is the way I would put it. And also, if you look at their production, pretty much have fallen off. I wouldn't say they're bad, but their best football is certainly behind them. These are players that, as a Patriots fan, I would love the Patriots to sign to cheaper deals to be their what?
Not Mike Williams, I don't. He's a bum.
Mike Williams is at the end of the list, but I'm talking in general.
Fair.
I think the Patriots and other teams who need a wide receiver too should go after players like this in order to give them that secondary option. We know that they can produce. We know that they're cheap, and their best days are behind them. A player like Tee Higgins, he's a wide receiver 1, but he's going to cost a ton of money, and so will Chris Godwin. So when I look at players like this, Diggs, Allen, Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins as well. Fine, we'll leave Mike Williams off the list, but you understand that he's another receiver who might be able to still produce at some level. These are players who could be a wide receiver 2 for a team. If the Patriots went out and got Stephon Diggs or Keenan Allen, and that's all they do at the wide receiver position, I would be very disappointed.
Yeah. I do agree. I obviously, I do tend to agree with that analysis. But the thing is, Diggs, he's coming off an injury, but he's still someone that I at least have some belief he can produce at a high level. Hopkins, I would be tempted to put him in the same realm as Diggs, but we all saw that Super Bowl. I mean, let's be real. Just dropping wide open passes, just not getting the separation. It is very clear this is not the DeAndre Hopkins of yore.
Not the DeAndre Hopkins of yesteryear, unfortunately.
And I mean, Diggs at least, I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But Williams, I'm very clear on that. But I mean that there are some guys, like I said, that are in that same boat. But either way,
Yeah.
If you are a receiver needing team like New England, Las Vegas, Washington, LA Chargers, it's definitely, if Higgins does end up getting tagged, then
this is a 2.
All eyes on Godwin.
These guys are all.
If he's gone, then it's going to be a massive feeding frenzy. I'm sorry. Continue.
These guys are all going to be 2s. I think, and if any team that signs these guys as their 1, they're not going to be in a good position. Now again, these are going to be cheap options. So that's why I'm intrigued by a guy like Keenan Allen, because if he's not all that you do, then I think that's a good option. Let me give you another name real quick. A guy who I anticipate has a really good chance of hitting the free agent market because he's going to be a cap casualty. But Christian Kirk. As far as his age, Christian Kirk, I believe he's on the right side of 30. Let me just. Christian.
He is.
Kirk.
He's 28.
So he is
28.
He's 28. Yes, 28. He'll be 28 by the start of the season. He's going into his age 28 season. That is essentially.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, I think he's a 1. I think he's the lowest tier of a 1 that you could possibly find. He's still in his 20s. Let's say a team like the Patriots. They traded for Cooper Kupp, got a restructure on his deal, of course, and then they signed Christian Kirk to like a 3-year deal. That's not my first choice of what I want, but let's assume that they cheaped out at the wide receiver position to get these guys so that they could solidify their offensive line. This is what I would like. I wouldn't mind this. I'll get over it. Because if Drake May is anything that we believe that he will be, with the improved, revamped coaching that we have, a good offensive line, then he'll be able to make do with Cooper Kupp and Christian Kirk. And I think a lot of other teams like the Panthers, like the Chargers, teams like that, the Commanders, I think if that's something that they did, just brought in Christian Kirk.
And then they'd be fine, because, I mean, think about it this way. The Chargers have McConkey. If you can take Kirk, which would draw coverage away from McConkey, that's a good thing. Because I know I can already hear some people in the distance say, oh, what about Quentin Johnson? They used a first round on him. You already know how I feel about Quentin Johnson. But the Commanders, he'd be a great fit there. Him and Scary Terry, oh my God, wouldn't that be quite a challenge to that scary Eagles secondary?
All I'm saying is I think Kirk is a 1. I liked what I saw in Jacksonville, and I believe Drake May is better than Trevor Lawrence. And they're working with a better coaching staff, better offensive line. Assuming that this happens because they cheaped out at wide receiver because of the offensive line, then I'll get over it. In fact, we'll more than get over it when they go 11-6 and Drake May throws for 30 touchdown passes.
All right, let's calm down, man. I mean, yeah, but
right.
Fair enough.
I was gonna touch on the tight end position, but there's nothing out there. You can take a look at it if you want, but Mike Gesicki, that's the only name that really stands out to me. Tyler Conklin, Jawan Johnson, Gerald Everett.
Yeah, and by the way, Everett just got released while we were recording this.
Yeah. So spot track
Austin Hooper was a solid backup in New England. Harrison Bryant might have some magic in him, but that's pretty much it. The tight end market, I mean, don't get me wrong, Adam, we say this all the time, right? Tight end is probably one of, if not the most just top-heavy position in the entire game because there's like 8 to 10 really good ones, and then there's just everybody else.
Certainly. And this tight end, this free agency class is worse than most, and that says a lot
in general.
But running back position, this is one that intrigues me because of the team that won the Super Bowl. Now, suddenly, if you're a run-first team and you're thinking you were kind of in despair before this Super Bowl, thinking, will we ever get a chance to win a Super Bowl with the way we've structured our team? The Philadelphia Eagles have given every single run-first team in football hope. Again, not a way I would build a team, but if you are, I want to say this. You should also look at what the Lions have done with their Sonic and Knuckles duo between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think a team like the Eagles should take a page out of their playbook and sign one of these free agents. J.K. Dobbins is 26 years old still, and he's coming off a year that proved that he can still do it, despite all of his lower half injuries that he has gone through.
Including one this year.
Yes, and came back from and was still fine. I think the Eagles should go after J.K. Dobbins. This is just a mini take that I've been developing myself. But if you can't expect Saquon Barkley to have a monster season again like you did. And if he starts it, then he's eventually going to get injured. The usage rate is eventually going to eat at him. Unless you're the Eagles and you are ahead of the curve. And you say, let's go after J.K. Dobbins. We have a 1-2 punch. You have 2 elite backs. I think any run-first team should be doing that. And I'm looking at the Ravens too. Aaron Jones is out there. Najee Harris. Nick Chubb is a free agent. Javonte Williams kind of sucks.
And I feel like he could be better with the right team. Same thing with Najee Harris. There's a bunch of guys, like you mentioned, that are just could start in a pinch. Like most recent 1,000-yard rusher Rico Dowdle, who I believe, like I said, was a 1,000-yard rusher. And there are a lot of good twos out there, right? Guys like Cam Akers, Kareem Hunt, Alexander Madison, guys who, if they're your one, you're in trouble. Oh, but if they're your two, you might be able to get away with it, you know?
Yeah, so that's what I'm kind of thinking of. You know, you're looking for another back to sort of pair with your lead guy. Because you know what? There is a path to winning a Super Bowl with a run first offense. But what you need to do is make sure it's sustainable. If you are the Eagles, if you are Mike Whartonby of the Squawking Eagles podcast and saying that the Eagles are going to become a dynasty, then you better back it up by actually making sure your back can actually last that long. Because I'm convinced that if they don't get another back, that Saquon's going to get hurt next year. The way he is used, everyone was saying the same thing about Christian McCaffrey last year. They said, with the big year that McCaffrey just had, how could you possibly suggest he's going to get hurt? Of course he did. So that's what ends up. They need to make sure that they can sustain it, because run-first offenses are not sustainable if you don't have many hands to make it light work. So,
Yeah, true.
Food for thought, Eagles. Bring in J.K. Dobbins. Kid's 26. I still can't believe he's that young. It feels like he's older.
Well, yeah, I mean, you never see him, so it would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, he should. If he didn't get hurt, I would have advocated for him for comeback player of the year. You don't come back. Players' careers end. Running backs' careers end after Achilles tears. And he came back and had an unbelievable season. But he got hurt again. So I don't know, something with the strength and conditioning staff. I'm sure the Eagles could figure it out, but
yeah.
Let's look at one last position before we move on to the offensive line, where we're just going to go over all offensive line. Quarterback, real quick. There's Sam Darnold and then a bunch of pieces of crap.
Mostly backups. I'd like to point that out. Their guys are, once again, if they're starting for you, you're probably screwed. But if they're your backups, you're in good shape. You know, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston, Justin Fields, Carson Wentz, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mason Rudolph. The only one who has proven he can start and play at a professional, actually good level is Sam Darnold. And even still, I still question whether or not that was the Vikings just helping him. But I digress.
It has to be the right situation for Darnold. I think among those positions, I think the perfect spot for him would be the Steelers. They know how to take troubled, kind of niche quarterbacks like Sam Darnold, plug them in and turn them into productive players. They went 9-8 with Kenny Pickett. Then they also went 10-7 with Russell Wilson, who was way past his prime. So if you can take Sam Darnold, who's still young, you still have George Pickens. I'm not convinced they're moving off from him yet. They could, but I'm not convinced yet.
I think they will, but not yet.
They have Pat Freiermuth. They have an improved offensive line, a good defense, good coaching staff. I think they would figure it out. With Sam Darnold, he wouldn't be as good as he was in Minnesota, but he'd still be solid. He'd be about as good as we know that he can be without being made to look better by more weapons than he can even know what to do with, right? I think if you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and an unbelievable offensive line and one of the best coaching staffs in the league, you're going to be made to look better than you are. It's like kind of the Tua situation in Miami. He has all of these weapons around him and a coaching staff that allows him to throw the ball as much as he wants. Then Tua's going to throw 30 touchdown passes and look better than he actually is. With Sam Darnold, I think you're going to with Sam Darnold on the Vikings, it looked like that. On the Steelers, he would look more like he actually is, which is still good. I don't think Sam Darnold is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but he's a guy who could still make the playoffs year in, year out.
Yeah. Once again, I feel like it's not going to be a quarterback, or he's not going to be a quarterback that can just take any team anywhere, like that one flower that can grow through cement. No, he's going to need a support system, He's a plug and play guy, like, for example, if you put him on, say, I don't know, the Jets, it might not work.
Yeah. All right, offensive line. There's a lot of good tackle prospects out here. Cam Robinson, Joe Noteboom, Ronnie Stanley, Jedrick Wills, Alaric Jackson. There's a lot of solid prospects out there. And there's...
Yeah.
I want to say... I would say that this is going to be a very busy offseason for those in need of offensive line in free agency. Because if you look at some of the, it's a deep tackle class in the draft, but there's no blue chips. There's not much of a gap between the guys who are slated to pick in the top 10 and the guys who are barely going to go in the first round or be taken day 2 even. Right? There's Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, sure. But is there a big gap between them and everybody else in that tackle class? Not really.
In fact, there's more people joining them. We are seeing more tackles rise up the draft boards than just Banks. If anything, Campbell, to his credit, has taken a bit of a step forward. But Banks, Adam, I'll tell you this. I don't know if you've been keeping track, but he might not even be the tackle 2. Because Armand Membo, if I'm butchering that right, if I'm butchering that, Armand, I'm very sorry, from Missouri, he's a monster. And Josh Simmons from The Ohio State University has also been one that is almost a lock to go in the first round. So do with that what you will.
Yeah, so like I said, there's a lot. I think there's going to be a lot more hype for the free agency class. And I'm sitting here as a Patriots fan. I'm looking at this offensive line. If Vrabel and the rest of that that front office decide, like they say, that they're going to go into free agency and go after a lot of these offensive line prospects, I'm just salivating over some of these prospects here. Looking at, let's say you go and get your left tackle. It's Alaric Jackson. He's 27. He's going to be 27 years old by the start of the season. Then you go and get yourself a second tackle, because I think they should go and get one. You don't need one because you have Onwenu, who can play right tackle, but he's a better guard. So let's say then you go out and get Cam Robinson. He's been a left tackle, but at right tackle, he'd be even better. That moves Onwenu over where he's a really good right guard. Then you just have to figure out left guard. And you can go and get yourself another guard, which there's a lot of them. You could also go Layden Robinson over there. You could go City Sow again. You could kind of give it sort of a what would you call it? Sort of a competition over in camp over the summer. You could go into the draft, or you could go and get Trey Smith, Patrick McCarry, who's basically the Ravens version of Mike Onwenu. There's also, this is one that I really like, and I don't think people have talked about it enough. Mekhi Becton. He's a failed tackle who was drafted in the first round by the Jets. He failed there as a tackle. hits free agency. The Eagles pick him up. They turn him into their treasure, who ends up being a really, really good left guard. The Patriots just so happen to need a left guard. And Mekhi Becton isn't really, I don't think he would be expensive. That's the thing. Because he hasn't really come out as far as the league knows as an elite guard. Take him now when he's cheap.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, it'd be smart to do so. In fact, he might be so cheap, they're saying that Philly might even have a solid shot at getting him back, but they might not just have the horses to compete with teams like New England or Washington or the Chargers.
I like Mekhi Becton. I liked him as a tackle. It turns out he was a failure. Maybe if he was healthy, he'd be better, but he was able to stay healthy as a guard, and he played very well as a guard. And the problem is some of the upper level guard prospects in the free agents in this class, Trey Smith, Tevin Jenkins, these are all guys who are going to be pretty expensive. And I know they need offensive. I don't want to sound cheap. I know they need offensive line help, but I'd be more willing to spend on the edges. I'd be more willing to spend on tackles, not on Trey Smith, Patrick McCarry, or Tevin Jenkins. So go cheaper and go for Mekhi Becton. And again, sign that second tackle so that Onwenu can move over to right guard. And then you're set. Just put Cole Strange over there at center or somebody else. Then you're set. And at that point, then I am happy with the Patriots going for Christian Kirk and Cooper Kupp and having that be it. Because I know that Drake May, if he is the guy, can make do suddenly with a better offensive line and better coaching staff. He'll make do with those guys. So that's going to be it as far as offense goes. We're going to go to the defense next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast. It may not have always showed it in the stat sheet, but you can see him making throws when he needs to make the throws.
Back-to-back games where he has 3 touchdowns. Someone's got to get that 6 or 7 spot.
He's an elite wide receiver as a rookie.
Truly a lose-lose scenario for both sides.
Welcome back to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Today, we have been going over some of the better free agents and a little bit on where we believe they'd be the best fits. And man, March 10th could not come any sooner. And this franchise tag window has been dead. And I say dead. Usually there's at least something that comes out that we can cover, or at least a trade. We haven't seen that either. So what we're going to go over today is a little bit of a review of this free agency class, because I feel like a lot of people don't really know the full extent of this class. The free agency class is better than the draft class, which means that it's important that we go over this, which isn't a high bar, but I think it's a pretty strong class. The wide receiver class has gotten a lot thinner since Tee Higgins and most likely Chris Godwin are coming off the board. But there are still some guys out there. And going into defense, let's first look at edge. It's the sexiest position out there as far as defense goes. And it's mostly veterans. It's very comparable to the wide receiver position, where there's a lot of good has-beens, but no guys in their prime who are just bound to make a massive deal. There's one guy in mind. But Khalil Mack, Hassan Reddick, will include Matt Judon,
DeMarcus
Lawrence. These are all guys who I believe will now. The edge position is very weird because it's a position that ages reasonably well, but once those players go past 30, no one's giving them a big deal. No one. And to be fair, most positions don't once they go past 30, unless you're a quarterback. That's when, because the quarterback position ages like fine wine. In fact, some players even play better in their 30s than they did in their 20s somehow. But as far as those guys go, Khalil Mack, right? Hassan Reddick, those are good plug-in plays who could be, for teams that need defense but don't really have the money this offseason to get it.
Yeah. I will say one thing, guys, especially like Khalil Mack and Hassan Reddick, I think serve more as like that final piece to a team that's angling to go to the championship. If that makes sense. If you want to go to an AFC or NFC championship game, you want to go to a Super Bowl, that's like that final piece that gets you over the hump, if that makes sense. They're not gonna be a cornerstone, but they can be that last little boost. And I think that's where they are in these careers, especially Khalil Mack. And you mentioned there was one player who you think's the only one that's like still in their prime and could possibly get a big deal. I feel like I know who it is. I'm going to ask, is it Josh Sweat?
Yes.
Yeah, obviously, because he's the only one. He's not even 28 yet. He's 27. Got 7 years under his belt, high level play with the Eagles, Super Bowl champ. There's a very real chance he hits the market. And there are other guys that are younger who I think you take a flyer on, guys like Charles Omenihu for one, Chase Young, who showed some flashes with the Saints. If he actually goes to a team, it's not the Saints, doesn't suck as much. A team that's just not as hopeless. I feel like he could do really well. That's pretty much it as far as edges go. There's other vets like Dante Fowler Jr., Emmanuel Ogba. That's pretty much it. I'm not going to mention Brandon Graham because I'm fairly certain he's going to retire. So, yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah, teams that I believe would be a great fit would be at the top of the list is New England. They have the most cap space, and they happen to need an elite edge rusher. I don't know if Abdul Carter is falling to them at 4 in the draft. So at that point, you're looking at Josh Sweat, and I think if Vrabel and the rest of that front office's words mean anything, then it means that they will go all out on the trenches, which means offensive line, like we talked about in the previous segment, and defense as well. Josh Sweat would be the guy who goes opposite Keon White. Another team would be Vegas. Max Crosby is an elite edge rusher, but they could use Josh Sweat. Give them a nice little strength over there on their front seven. Their edge rushing core would be the best in the league. The Commanders, they need help on defense, and they have $79 million in cap space to work on it. The Chargers, here's the problem with the Chargers. They have a lot of money, but they do have some needs. They're expected to there's a good chance that they're going to release Joey Bosa. On top of that, Khalil Mack is old and he's a free agent. They need someone to replace him with. Josh Sweat.
Yeah, that would definitely be some to like I said, replace Mack, who I feel like is gone. Replace Bosa too, who's more like, it's not like Bosa's bad. He's just going to be a cap casualty, But yeah, Sweat is definitely someone who I feel like would go to the Chargers.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And let's look at, I want to look at the secondary as well. All right, here we are.
Corners or safeties or just secondary in general? Nice.
Secondary in general.
Because I'll say one thing, as far as in the secondary, right?
Yeah.
As far as just strictly safeties go, there's actually a lot of really good ones. I
see Justin Simmons.
Justin Simmons, Justin Reed, Xavier Woods, Jeremy Chin, Julian Blackman, Quandre Diggs, Ashton Davis, Javon Holland, for crying out loud, Chuck Clark, like, people actually starting caliber, Andre Sisco, like, there's a lot. Von Bell, even. I mean, hey, if you need a safety, this is the class for you. For the rest of us, we might just suffer.
And there's some good pieces as far as corners go as well.
And
there's
how?
Carlton Davis, Travarius Ward. I like DJ Reed. He had a down year, but I still like him. Byron Murphy. There's older guys like Stephon Gilmore and Mike Hilton. CJ Henderson.
Jackson's there too.
Dante Jackson.
Shaquille Griffin, who could forget?
Yeah, it's interesting how the Steelers kind of hammered out their CB2 position. Is they kind of threw shit at the wall and hoped that it would stick. They had their number one in Joey Porter, but who else were they going to go with? They decided, you know what, let's go for Dante Jackson. Let's go for CJ Henderson. Dante Jackson ended up being the better guy, and he was their CB2. But it just goes to show that the CB1 is tough to find. But the number 2, that's reasonably easy. And I don't really see a number 1 on this list, to be honest.
Maybe Ward, but that's like a massive maybe.
Yeah. I like Davis, but I like him as a 2. And he's probably going to be an expensive 2, just given his age. And he has been a 1 before in Tampa Bay. Maybe. I mean, Jamel Dean was a good back as well.
Yeah.
But there's not really much out here as far as number 1s. There's a lot of 2s I like.
Yeah. I definitely see where you're coming from. Is it me, right? And if you think I'm being insane, just let me know, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like free agency classes are getting weaker, like every year. And we're seeing fewer and fewer of the league's elite changing teams, which you can argue that's good. You can argue that's bad. I'm just making an observation. I'm not saying it's one way or the other. I'm just saying, like, these past few free agency classes haven't been as star-studded. And, every year we see it, they're talking about all the free agency big headliners. They always end up getting tagged.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. And perhaps it's leading to this big, shall we say, talent void that the NFL is currently experiencing. I mean, at least look at last season. You saw what happened.
Sure. I think some of the Washington needs help at corner. Past Lattimore, who they just traded for, but they need a 2. I think that would be they'd be a good landing spot for a lot of these corners. Like, let's say they had Marshawn Lattimore and Carlton Davis. Or Marshawn Lattimore and oh boy. Yeah.
Lattimore and Ward would be insane, I tell you. Because Commanders fans will tell you, and so will I, their corner 2 situation was god-awful. Because you know who it was, right? And when I say every huh? Oh no, it somehow gets worse. I promise. And when I say this name, every Commanders fan is gonna scream. Benjamin St. Juste. This guy is in the words of Stephen A. Smith, a bona fide scrub. And trust me, I feel like corner 2 is actually really high up on their list of needs. It's not a bad need to have, but you have to consider the disparity. Because on one hand, it's Marshawn Lattimore, and on the other hand, it's quite literally nothing.
Well, we brought up this conversation. We brought up this one name coming up last offseason, and he wasn't signed until the summertime. But Stephon Gilmore had yet another productive season with the Vikings, who helped to sort of turn around that defense from the year prior where they were terrible. Now, the Vikings have a couple of needs and not much money, and they're going to need to they're going to want to bring back Byron Murphy. So they're going to have to let go of Stephon Gilmore. Now, Gilmore will be cheap, but a 34-year-old cornerback is not exactly their best. How would I put this?
Not a great use of money.
Not the best investment. As much as it's been awesome seeing Stephon Gilmore age very gracefully. But he's kind of a plug and play for a team that really needs a CB2 and doesn't have much money for it, or has a million needs and can't afford to sort of give out that money for a number 2 corner. For example, the Patriots have a ton of needs, and corner 2 is one of them, but they need to figure out the offensive line first. They need to get to the edge rusher first. They don't have a number 1 edge rusher. They don't have a top wide receiver or a second wide receiver. Okay. So I advocated for this last offseason, and they didn't do it. But the Patriots reuniting with Stephon Gilmore would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Him as their number 2 would be great. And I'm sorry, they can't go after Carlton Davis. They don't have the money for it. They can't go after Charvarius Ward. They don't have the money for it. There's some corners out there. They could go after Dante Jackson, but he may not. He may be expensive too. And expensive as far as when I say expensive, I say expensive as far as what they need and if they'll be able to set aside enough money in order to also satisfy this need. Because I also haven't gotten to the off-ball linebackers yet, because they have an issue there too. They have Juwan Bentley, but that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, maybe Tavai, I'd count Tavai. It's just he can't be a number 1. He was good not being a number 1, and you can't hold that against him. Just Bentley got hurt.
Yes. All right. Defensive line. This is probably going to be the last one before we end the show. But interior defensive line, Sheldon Rankins, BJ Hill.
Who just got released today, by the way.
Yep. And yes, that's true. And that freed up a lot of money for him. BJ Hill, DJ Jones. There's not really too much in here, is there? Javon Kinlaw.
Nah, a lot of project guys, a lot of guys, you just kind of take a flyer on, but that's pretty much it.
A lot of one-trick ponies. A lot of these guys are just big bodies you can throw in who could be very good run stoppers, but they're not. You're not finding a Chris Jones or an Aaron Donald in here. At least that I'm talking just that caliber player who can also get into the backfield. You don't have anybody like that in this class.
Not even slightly.
I'm by no means trying to say that you're just going to find an Aaron Donald in any free agency class. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there's nobody who has the ability to get into the backfield as far as interior linemen go this offseason. And that is very rare, and it's becoming more and more valued as years go by, because you're seeing a lot of teams that have that, and they're very successful on defense. The reason is because those types of players are more impactful than edge rushers when they are able to get there, because the pressure comes from up front. It's hard to win on the interior. It's not hard to win on the edge. The tackle position is not easy to be good at because of the nature of the position. Edge rushers win more. Interior linemen don't win more. That's why guard is an easier position to be good at. So when you have a Chris Jones or a Matabike, when you have an Aaron Donald, right? All those types of players who can get into the backfield, that's more impactful. That's why I really like Christian Barmore on the Patriots, because he's actually shown that kind of ability. He's flashed it a little bit, And if he is in a better defensive system, which I think they will have this year, I think Barmore can really, really shine as a player. Because I think he's that
already
kind of
shown what
player.
he can do.
What's that?
I said, well, he's already shown like what he's capable of, you know?
I said he's flashed it. I'm not saying.
Okay.
I'm saying his best days are ahead of him.
Yeah, fair.
And it's hard for him to be an elite player when he's getting double teamed all the time. There's no real threat out there on the edge. They had it in Matt Judon, now they don't. So they need an edge sort of presence to kind of open things up, because I think Barmore can be that kind of guy who can get up the middle, but they need a guy who can win from the edge, which they don't have. They have Keon White, and he's solid. I don't mind Keon White.
But he's not a one, you know, he's not the guy that you got a game plan for.
For your TJ Watt, Keon White is your Alex Highsmith.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. Poor man. This is like lowercase. Is there any other free agent that I've missed here? It feels like I've just gone through all of them.
You've missed inside linebacker. I mean, and there's some good ones, you know, like Zach Bond and Dre Greenlaw.
Yes, you're right. Yes. Levante David as well, Bobby Wagner, Devondre Campbell.
There's a lot of I would pump the brakes on Campbell, Mr. Quit.
Eric Kendricks. Yeah.
But yeah, so my point is, like I said, there are like a lot of actually like really good inside linebackers that are on the market. And since
my only problem though is that I'm very reluctant to spend on that position, because it's number one, it's not too hard to find them in later rounds of drafts. Number two, I can name you a lot of times where edge rusher for a championship caliber team or even a championship team has been a massive hole from them, and they were still able to win a championship. I'm not saying that it's not an important position. All of them are by the nature of the sport. But I just remember those late 2010s Patriots teams. They did not have that good of as far as linebackers, off-ball linebackers. They had Hightower for 2016. Got hurt. They had nothing in 2017. They still made the Super Bowl. 2018, Hightower passed his prime. That's really all they had. Besides, I'm forgetting the name.
They had Van Noy.
They had Kyle Van Noy. Hightower passed his prime and Kyle Van Noy. That's not great. That's okay. But the fact that they were able to make it to 3 straight Super Bowls with only one superstar inside linebacker during that time, and only 1 year of him being a superstar, by the way, then I look at that and I say, well, is it that big of a need? Do you need it that bad?
Well, I mean, I guess a lot of it does depend on the play calling too, you know?
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at some of the linebackers the Chiefs have had, they've had some good ones, but how many years have we gone over the Super Bowl and we've looked at, we always do our position comparisons before it, right? Yeah. Almost every year we pick the other teams. Like we picked last year we picked the 49ers inside linebackers.
Well, they also had Warner and Greenlaw, so it's not necessarily that they're bad. It's just other people have better.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying we picked the other teams every year.
Fair.
Warner and Greenlaw, but which team won? Because the Chiefs were solid, or they were elite at the spots where they needed it. Quarterback, pass catcher. I say pass catcher because they have Travis Kelce. Even Yeah. I'm just saying linebacker, it's obviously an important position, but if you're an off-ball linebacker and you're elite at that position, that's always great. It's a good thing to have. But if you don't have it, I just don't see how that could be sort of a deal breaker as far as winning a Super Bowl. If you have the edge rushers, if you have a good secondary, then you're going to have a good defense, most likely.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. All right. I think that's about all the scheduled content we have. Do we have anything else before we end the show?
Just a small update. The Saints have hired a new offensive and defensive coordinator. They got the Eagles QB coach, I think his name is Doug Nussmeier, to be their OC, and their defensive coordinator is actually former Chargers head coach, a massive overall failure, Brandon Staley.
Yeah. The Saints are becoming the Eagles South, as the Squawking Eagles podcast said.
And they're right.
And maybe not even in a good way. Like, they don't have the best. They're just hiring their old coaches. All right. That'll do it for us tonight. Thank you for listening to us. We have new episodes out on Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Fridays at 5. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have all our episodes available on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and so much more. Also, be sure to follow our Instagram at Fumblerooski_podcast to keep up with our podcast and the latest coverage on the NFL. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Over and out.